Hi guys, it's me, HD, and welcome to the final weekend of 2019, the 2019 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And today, of course, is the final Friday practice day of the season as well. And hopefully today we can find out who is looking good for this final race. But yes, sadly, it is the final race. This season has flown by. It felt like we were in Bahrain a month ago. That's how quickly it honestly feels to me. That's how great the season also has been for me. Most of the season has been very, very exciting, and it just has completely blown by this season. I can't believe that we're already basically in December. It's absolutely incredible. But yeah, the final race of the season, hopefully this weekend, it's a good one and not a usual boring Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, because let's be honest, we normally get that at this track. But yeah, hopefully we get something this weekend that is maybe not on par with Brazil, because that was a bit mental, but, a bit exciting, maybe a surprise, here and there. Hopefully we do get that, but hopefully you guys, no matter where you're on the world or what time it is in your part of the world, hopefully you guys are doing well, and hopefully with me today, you will enjoy practice 2 and watch along practice 2 with me, and also interact with me later on and ask me some questions about what is currently going on in the world of Formula 1, but of course, there has been a practice session earlier this morning in Abu Dhabi, and here are the results of that session. So Valtteri Bottas, who will start from the back of the grid, because of course he had an oil pressure, an oil leak on his engine in Brazil, he will start from the back at this race. He finished in P1. Max Verstappen was P2, Lewis Hamilton P3, then Albon, Vettel, Grosjean, Leclerc, Magnussen, Giovinazzi, Hulkenberg complete the top 10. And then it was Norris, Stroll, Raikkonen, Perez, Kvyat, and then Gasly, Sainz, Kubica, Ricciardo, Russell. The reason Ricciardo was so far down is because he wasn't exactly doing, say, proper quick runs at the start of the session, and then he had an engine failure. So that's why he ended up in 19th place. And then, of course, Russell is at the back. But because this is when it comes to, say, qualifying in the race, because it's a day to night, or I guess late day to night race, practice 1 and practice 3 don't really matter at all, because the temperatures that we see in those sessions are not representative of what we see come, qualifying or the Grand Prix. So these results don't really matter. I mean, practice 1 in Abu Dhabi is really about getting the car started up and make sure it works all fine. Because again, the temperature's not representative at all. But now, let's get into the teams and what I expect of them today and really this weekend. So first off, Mercedes, the world champions, and they are the clear favourites this weekend. No doubt about that whatsoever. They've won every Grand Prix here since 2014. And if you come to think of it, since 2014, can you think of a qualifying or race since 2014 that this Mercedes team have looked like they might not win? They've dominated basically every Abu Dhabi Grand Prix weekend since the V6 hybrid era began. So they are the clear favourites. As you can see on the bottom of the screen, Lewis Hamilton is the most successful driver at this track. So Hamilton and Mercedes might be an unstoppable package this weekend. And again, they are the favourites. They will have their challenges. I think Max Verstappen for sure in the Red Bull. The Red Bull also does tend to go well here. They'll be up there as well, but Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes, I just don't see how anyone realistically, as long as he doesn't have a problem, and he did actually have a small engine problem in practice 1, as long as he doesn't have a problem, I just don't see how anyone beats Lewis Hamilton in that car this weekend. I just don't see how that happens. And it's going to take a monumental drive to beat Lewis Hamilton this weekend. It's going to take, best drive of the season for that certain driver so far, or for the entire season, of course, because it's the final race. So I think right here you are looking at the absolute favourite to win this weekend's race. Hopefully, though, even if he does win this weekend's race, that it's still a fight to win, not just a clear dominant win like it was last year for the Brit. Next up is Ferrari. And of course, coming away from Brazil, Ferrari will be very, very keen to get this season over and done with, because this season has just been a complete disaster. And they'll want to sign off here in a way that's not too fitting of their season, because it has been embarrassing and quite comedic, to be honest. And they'll want to have I think Ferrari want to have a quiet weekend, even if they're not that quick, which I don't think they will be. What Ferrari need to have this weekend is just a normal, quiet weekend where, again, even if they're not fast, things don't really, massively go wrong and there's not massive drama, because even when Ferrari this season have won races, there's always drama with this team. So all I ask of the Ferrari team this weekend is, can you please not be so dramatic this weekend? Can we have one weekend where you just perform like a normal racing team and are not a circus, as I've said plenty of times before this season? Can they just not have another, a weekend like we had in Brazil? Leclerc having to start from the back and then Leclerc and Vettel having contact, or a weekend like Japan where, great qualifying, but their race over basically in terms of winning the race after about 3 corners. All I want for Ferrari is a normal weekend, just a normal weekend, and hopefully they can have that. Charles Leclerc will be able to start start as high as he wants to, because of course he doesn't have the penalty that he had in Brazil, and that will be an advantage for him in qualifying, that fresh power unit he does have. And Sebastian Vettel, by the way, has had a 3rd child. That's why he was not at the track yesterday, so congratulations to him. I know some people out there were disappointed that he wasn't able to be answering the media's questions about something he's already answered the media about. But yeah, the 2 drivers this weekend should go fine. Sebastian Vettel does tend to do pretty well here, considering whatever car he's driving and how quick the car is that given weekend or that year. So again, if they don't have the usual drama, I think Ferrari will do, okay. I don't think they're going to be that great. I just don't think this track suits this car. I think in the first 2 sectors, they're probably going to be maybe slightly quicker than anyone else. But once we get into the final sector, game over. It's not even a contest. They're not going to be anywhere near Mercedes or Red Bull in that final sector. So, yeah, Ferrari, not in pace-wise for a great weekend, but just please do not go over-dramatic this weekend. We need to have at least one weekend where they don't bottle it or have, the mother and father of all weekends in terms of how bad it's going to be. Next up, though, is Red Bull, the final top team. And Red Bull, of course, have had, a good season this season. They haven't improved on their position in the constructors, but if they had, let's say, 2 properly good drivers in that car, I think they would honestly beat Ferrari in the constructors. No disrespect to Gasly. He was not good enough in the Red Bull, and Albon has been better than Gasly since he stepped into the Red Bull, but Albon still hasn't been at a level where I can say he's been, very good in the Red Bull. But yeah, Red Bull have had a good season, and I think they will cap it off with a good weekend this weekend. I think Red Bull will have a faster car than Ferrari. I think Max Verstappen is going to be Lewis Hamilton's closest competitor for this weekend. Clearly, I don't think the Ferraris can really, compete, especially when it comes to the Grand Prix. Sorry, just cleared my throat there, guys. And yeah, I just think Verstappen, he's going to be the closest competitor, but I don't honestly think he can really be, right there with Hamilton, because I just think the Hamilton-Mercedes package this weekend is going to be just too strong for him. But if he drives as well as he has earlier on this season, where he's outperformed the car massively, who knows, maybe he can get his first win at this track and Red Bull's first win here since 2013. But I'd say probably at best this weekend he's going to be P2. I just don't quite see P1 unless Lewis Hamilton has a problem or Max Verstappen puts in his best performance of the season. But also, I will say, it will be interesting to see, given, Alex Albon has had a few races at Red Bull now, it will be interesting to see, now that we're coming to a track that he has raced at before, it will be interesting to see how close he can get to Max Verstappen. I'm hoping he can get within 2.5, 3 tenths of a second, and he really should, because again, he's raced here before. He doesn't have that excuse of, well, I've never, driven this track, I've never been to this country before, like he was, for example, in Brazil. He'd never been probably to that country before or even to that track. So he had an excuse there. But this weekend, he has to be, I think, really considering Valtteri Bottas is starting at the back and the Ferraris, I don't think are going to be that quick. I think Albon has to be contending seriously for a podium this weekend. And I don't think the Red Bull car is as quick as I think it will be. I don't really think he has that much of an excuse this weekend. So I really want to see Albon put in a good performance, be on the podium, and show that, you know, for 2020, Albon can do things in the Red Bull car. But now, let's get into the midfield. First off, Renault. Well, of course, Renault have had a terrible 2019, and it could get even worse if they don't score points on Sunday and Toro Rosso score, I think, 8 points. I think if Toro Rosso score 8 points, then Toro Rosso will finish P5 in the Constructors, which would cap off how poor a season this has been for Renault. And simply this weekend, it's all about beating Toro Rosso, which is quite a depressing thing to say, because this time last year, I thought I'd be talking about Renault being in McLaren's position, you know, clearly finishing P4, getting a podium, but they just haven't been able to do that this season. They've had a couple good races, but most of the season has been quite underwhelming considering the, you know, drivers they've got, the team that is there. It has been quite underwhelming, but this weekend, again, just about beating Toro Rosso. If they do that, then fine, but they've really got to this weekend show, you know, going into 2020, what this team has, because in the last couple races, Renault have not exactly, you know, responded well to their mid-season slump, I guess you could call it. They've not really done that well. So I want to see Renault, you know, really showcasing how great of a team they can be this weekend, you know, in comparison to the midfield. I'm not saying, you know, beat McLaren and finish at the front of the midfield, but they need to really end the season on a high, so at least they go into 2020 saying, you know, we can really improve this team, improve this car, and have a great season next season. And also, this weekend, of course, it is most likely Nico Hülkenberg's final race in Formula 1. Hopefully he has a good weekend. He was P10 in practice 1, and if he finishes in the top 10 in qualifying in the race, I think that'd be good enough for him this weekend. But yeah, hopefully he does have a good weekend. You know, nothing too dramatic in a bad way. I will say, though, again on Hülkenberg, he does deserve to be on the grid, no doubt about it, but you cannot tell me that he hasn't had enough opportunities to showcase why he should be, say, in a front-running team or, you know, be in Formula 1 until he's, you know, 35, 36 years old. He's had enough opportunities to really showcase how good of a driver he can be, and he hasn't took those opportunities. So, again, even though he is good enough to be on the grid, you can't really say that he hasn't had enough time to show why he should be in a front-running team, which is what many people thought he should have been in, say, a few years ago. But anyway, hopefully he does have a good final weekend. And next up is McLaren. And yet, McLaren have confirmed P4 in the Constructors. Well done to them. And this weekend simply is about them just having a good weekend, finishing at the front of the midfield. And I think really what would be good for McLaren is if they just showcased why they've been so good this season, which is when it's mattered most in qualifying in the race, they have really come out and shone and put in, you know, the laps that have mattered at the right times. And I think even in practice today, if they don't look that great, as long as in qualifying the race they produce when it matters, then that'll really showcase, again, why they finished P4 on the Constructors. Because if you look at this season, McLaren have not been dominantly quick at the front of the midfield. They have had a quick car, but the reason McLaren have finished in the position they finished in is because they've been the most consistent team, really, out of the midfield. There's been races where they really were not that quick at all, but still got 2 cars in the points. And I think as long as McLaren can showcase that a bit this weekend, then it would be a nice, again, showcase of why they've had such a great 2019 as they head into 2020, which of course are hoping to be even better than it has been in 2019. Next up is Alfa Romeo. And after Alfa's 22 points that they gained in Interlagos, Alfa can actually finish in P7 in the Constructors after this Grand Prix. Only, though, if they outscore Racing Point by, I think, 11 points it is in the Constructors. And that's not likely, let's be honest. Alfa Romeo are not likely to score 11 points this weekend on their own. Never mind outscore Racing Point by 11 points. But who knows? Maybe if we get a couple retirements from the top teams, maybe if Alfa do have a, say, quicker car, maybe Alfa can put pressure on Racing Point. But most likely Alfa are going to finish a P8 in the Constructors. And let's be honest, they deserve to finish P8 in the Constructors because this season they've had a quick enough car, but they've been very inconsistent and they've not produced anywhere near enough to be in a position of P7 or P6 or P5 in the Constructors when, again, the pace of their car has been good this season, and the pace of their car, I think, has been good enough for a P6 or P5 in the Constructors table. But again, very inconsistent, this team. And it has been, I think, quite a shame because they could have achieved a lot this season, Alfa, but just haven't quite got it together. But hopefully this weekend, they can have a good weekend and kind of like Renault, showcase, what this team can do going into 2020 and try and end the season on a high, especially after the, last few races have not exactly been great, despite in Brazil them finishing P4 and P5. Next up is Haas, and for Haas, they'll be so happy that it's the final race because their car is so bad that, P6 and P8 in practice one, yeah, that's great, but we know that's not their real pace. And yeah, we know Haas this season have they've been terrible. They've been absolutely terrible. I can only really think of 2 races this season out of 21 where they've actually been good, which was Melbourne and Barcelona. Other than that, they've been poor. That's how bad the season's been. And there's actually been, 3 or 4 races where they've been racing the Williamses, who are desperately slow. So yeah, Haas have not had a good season at all. But one thing that I think we can look out for this weekend is to see if Haas are continuing to improve on their tyre issues. Not just tyre wear, but tyre warm-up as well. Because that has also been a problem for them. But as long as Haas this weekend can put in a performance that is, better than expected, and I'm not expecting really anything at all from this team, and as long as they can showcase improvement based on earlier parts of the season where they've been desperately slow, then I think that's a good enough weekend for them. And I will say with Haas, even though I've given them a lot of grief this season, they have definitely, since the summer break, improved that car a lot. The race pace is still not good, but it's a lot better than it was around, say, France, Austria, Silverstone time, where it was really bad. At least it has improved to where they can still be fighting, in and around P10, P11, if you forget Mexico and their home race. Yeah, Haas are making good progress, but not massive, but hopefully they can showcase more progress in this weekend's Grand Prix. But now let's go on to the Toro Rosso team, who, again, as I said earlier, can get P5 in the Constructors if they outscore Renault by 8 points. If you're wondering why it's only 8 points and not 9 points, it's because if Toro Rosso finish level on points with Renault, then Toro Rosso will still beat Renault because Toro Rosso have had a better, their best race result is better than Renault's best race result of the season. Renault's best race result of the season is P4, I think, in the Italian Grand Prix. And of course, Gasly finished second in Brazil. So 8 points over Renault in the Grand Prix is what they need. And I'll be honest, even if they don't get it, I think Toro Rosso do deserve it. I think they have performed better this season than Renault. They've been very good this season. Been in the points 90, I wouldn't say 90% of the time, more like 75, 80% of the time. They've been really in the points. Maybe at their worst, they've been just outside the points. That just shows you how consistent they have been this season. And I think given the podiums, the hard work they put in, and how, well the drivers have done in the cars, Gasly, Kvyat, and Albon as well, I do think they do deserve P5 in the Constructors, and it would be very nice to see them get it, because this team has been a team that over the years has had a car that's good, but they've never really got it together. This season, it just feels like Toro Rosso have really got it together, but they're still not in a position at the moment, of course, in the Constructors to be top 5. But again, it would be great to see them get it, and hopefully they do, because again, I think they really do deserve it over Renault, who, let's be honest, Renault are really in the top 5 of the Constructors because of how big they are compared to Toro Rosso. If you gave Toro Rosso the amount of resources, the drivers they have, money they have to Toro Rosso, then I think Toro Rosso would be clearly ahead of Renault, because Renault have just been that poor in 2019 Formula 1 season. And the last midfield team, of course, is Racing Point. And Racing Point are not really racing for anything. I mean, Alfa, realistically, behind them can't catch them, and they can't catch Toro Rosso really ahead. So, yeah, Racing Point heading for P7 in the Constructors, which is okay based on the season. I mean, we do have to remember, between the Spanish Grand Prix and the British Grand Prix, Racing Point were very slow. Very, very slow, and did well to really stay anywhere near in contention in the Constructors by the time they got to their B-Spec car just before the summer break. So I think P7 in the Constructors is just about okay, and I don't think they'll be that disappointed with it. But I think, given, the situation with their lack of development they've had this season, I think Racing Point have had a good 2019. I think they've done the best they can with what they've been given. I think the two drivers have done the best they could. And I think going forward into 2020, we'll get into this more so next week when we do my season review as part of a live podcast, me and Nib, on probably Tuesday that'll be. As long as Racing Point can be, say, at the level they've been at since Hockenheim, which has been a lot better than they were before Hockenheim, but been, around P10, P11, then I think Racing Point next season is a dark horse in the midfield battle, and I think they really could end up getting a top 5 Constructors, table position. But yeah, this season it's been all right. They could have had a couple podiums here or there. Actually, not a couple podiums. I mean, one podium with Lance Stroll and Hockenheim, but car just wasn't quick enough, I guess, that weekend, or in that situation, to get it. But yeah, Racing Point this weekend, they'll be all right. They've never really gone amazing here. They've had a couple good races here in the past, but I'm not expecting that much from the Racing Point team. But as long as they can get some points, I think that'd be absolutely fine for them. And of course, last of all is Williams, and well, who cares about them? But there has been some news about Williams. Nicholas Latifi has been confirmed as George Russell's teammate for 2020 in the, you have to say, guys, the most surprising news of the season so far. I mean, it's not like we were calling this back in May. I mean, who saw this coming? But in all seriousness, he deserves it. I think, he has had a good season in Formula 2. He hasn't been the best driver in F2, but that's not really how Formula 1 works, and we know that. The drivers on the grid, the 20 drivers on the grid, they're not the 20 best in the entire world. So we know that's not how it works. And yes, Nick de Vries does deserve a Formula 1 seat, but he's in Formula E now and clearly enjoying himself over there. And I think Latifi, given the work he's done for Williams this season, in the practice sessions, simulator work, and I think given also his financial package, which you have to mention because it is definitely an ingredient to why he is in that team, he has helped the team. He really has helped the team in two different aspects. Again, driving and giving feedback, but also financially as well. So I think Latifi does deserve the seat. There wasn't really anyone else out there that Williams were going to go for. They were always going to go for Nicholas Latifi. And I don't think he'll do that bad next season. I think as long as he can stay within a tenth or two of Rosso, and if the Williams car can be a bit closer to the midfield, I don't think he'll do that bad. I think he'll do all right. And I think it'll be interesting to see how he gets on against Rosso, because the only time we've seen him against Rosso was, I think, last season in F2, and he did okay in races where he was, close enough to compete, but wasn't really, really in there. So it'll be interesting to see how he does, but I think he'll do all right. He'll definitely do better than Robert Kubica, who, we have to say, Robert Kubica just simply isn't good enough for Formula 1 anymore. Has, though, Robert made a miraculous recovery to be back in Formula 1, and I think that's an achievement in itself. But yeah, Latifi at Williams in 2020, no surprise at all. But guys, we have now just under 4 minutes to go until practice 2 gets underway at the Yas Marina Circuit in Abu Dhabi. So guys, get ready for practice 2. And don't forget as well to, right now in the live chat, put your comments in and let me know what you think will happen this weekend for all the teams. For Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, and of course the midfield, Renault, McLaren, Alfa, Haas, Racing Point, and Toro Rosso. And as well, what do you think of the Nicholas Latifi news at Williams? Do you think Nicholas will do well at Williams, given how quick the car, might be or might not be? Let me know in the live chat right now, and I'll try to, if I can, read out some comments. But as you can hear, guys, my throat's not in the best condition, so I'm going to have a quick drink, and then I'll get to your comments, a couple of your comments, in just a moment. And also, we'll switch pictures here. There you go. Charles Leclerc on the Ferrari roller coaster. Very coincidental, isn't it? A roller coaster for Ferrari. Describes their season. Right, let's see what you guys have to say in the chat. See what you guys have to say. Mostly an F1 fan. Nice to see live streams are working again. Yep, that is very, very good news. I missed doing the streams so much, honestly. I really did. And it is such a shame we couldn't do the Brazilian Grand Prix weekend. But, these things happen. These things happen. I mean, look at Formula 1. I mean, how many times have you seen a team have a mountain of reliability issues all in one weekend? It happens. And that's basically what happened for me. It was just reliability. And also had slight reliability issues coming into this week as well. But again, it happens. Same in Formula 1. Reliability issues happen. You've got to expect them to happen at some point during a season. And it's the same with me as well, with the amount of equipment I use for my streams. But yeah, it's great to be back. By the way, nice to see this little photo as well. A torpedo talking to an Iceman. Wonder what they're talking about. But we have 90 seconds to go until practice 2. So, for anyone new watching, let me let you guys know, if I can speak English, what we do for the watch-along. So, I do not show live, video footage, obviously, for obvious copyright reasons. What I will do is show a slideshow of pictures. There'll be one picture every 3 minutes, playing during the, the session, and I will commentate over that and provide a radio-style commentary of what is going on at the track. I'll have the timer in the top left, showing how much time is left in the session, which is going to be 90 minutes, of course. And also, I'll have a running order running along the bottom of the screen, showing the live order of the session, and I will update it as many times as I can. It won't be absolutely up to the second or even to the minute, but when I get time to, I'll update the order to what it actually is. So that's what we do for watch-alongs here on this channel. But I think it's now time to get ready for the practice 2 session. And as I just said, hour and a half session, practice 2. And this is the last Friday practice day of the season. And we've had a couple, interesting Friday practice sessions, but most of them have been not really representative of what's happened later on in the weekend. So there you go. But let me just do the text here if I can. remaining in just that for you guys. Go. Practice 2 has not started yet, but it will in just a moment as Lando Norris is getting his crash helmet on in the McLaren garage. And practice 2 has started about 7 seconds time. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there you go. Practice 2 is underway. And there you go. Slideshow has started. These pictures, by the way, are of course from practice 1. Because of course we haven't had any running at this time of the day so far. So that's why it'll be all in the daylight or the hot beating sun. And also let me get up the running order if I can. So there you go. By the way, this is not the running order right now of the session, and it's not the running order of practice 1. It's just the the normal order of the drivers, team by team, driver by driver. As the first driver on track is Kimi Räikkönen, who has won here before but doesn't really like the track. Who said, I think back in 2009, the first few corners are all right, but after that it's a bit crap. Which is, yeah, correct, I think. As Antonio Giovinazzi also comes out on track in the second Alfa Romeo. And, yep, Kimi now entering the first long DRS straight on his outlap. And also now Romain Grosjean on the circuit. As just looking in the garages at the moment, we are on the TV. Daniel Kvyat still in his car. Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas preparing to go out as well. As, yeah, we only got 3 cars on the track right now. Lewis Hamilton is not even in his car yet, so shows you that they're not really rushing to get out. As Charles Leclerc comes out on track on a set of hard compound tyres, which is a bit of a surprise because with the temperatures going down, you'd think you want to be on the softer compounds for a quicker, tyre warm-up, but there you go. It's Ferrari. There's no point trying to explain their logic. As we're seeing Jean Alesi there in the paddock. And here is Kimi Räikkönen on the medium tyres, and I assume he will go straight for a flying lap. Yes, he will. So, comes now into the final corner. And Kimi Räikkönen gets his first lap of the session underway. Let's see how this Alfa is handling. Throws into turn 1. And car looks pretty good. And now into 2 and 3, which is, well, with qualifying fuel on board, should be flat out through those corners. And then at the end of the first sector, does a 17.6. And now comes into the turn 7 hairpin, where that corner actually would be very good if they just went straight on from turn, what it is now, turn 4. If they just missed out that chicane before turn 7, the hairpin would actually be very good to overtake, but of course they won't do that. As Kimi Räikkönen now enters the first chicane at the end of the DRS straights, and I have to say the Alfa looks pretty good on this lap. No real corrections of the car. Car's not moving all over the place. It's doing what Kimi wants as he reaches about 320 kilometers an hour at the end of the second DRS straight and does a 1 minute flat so far for this lap after 2 sectors. As also the Haas of Kevin Magnussen is on track as well. As Räikkönen now comes into the final sector where really the lap is won and lost. In the first sector, it's not really that, big of a sector. I mean, there's only one real corner. The first corner, turn 2 and 3 are flat out. Then the middle sector is all about power, but the final sector is all about grip and all about how much you attack the corners and how much speed you get out of the corners. As Kimi Räikkönen comes across the line on a 139.9, which is not too bad for first run on the medium compound tyres. As there is Fernando Alonso in the paddock, who of course a year ago had just retired from Formula 1. As we've got the 2 Toro Rossos on track now, and the Williams of George Russell. But And I'm assuming he'll go into the McLaren garage as Valtteri Bottas is getting strapped up, ready to get in his silver arrow. And Antonio Giovinazzi has gone second and a second slower, as Romain Grosjean now goes second and about 4/10 slower than Raikkonen. As I thought, Raikkonen's first flying lap there looked pretty good, and the time was pretty good as well. Here is Charles Leclerc, though, who is on screen, funnily enough, on his first proper run, and he is on a hard compound tyre, so he's a step harder on tyre than Raikkonen. And let's see what he can do. He should be going faster than Kimi Raikkonen, but I don't think he'll be by that much, as Leclerc now comes into turn 18. Now turn 19, where his teammate Sebastian Vettel crashed in practice 1. And now into the final 2 corners. The Ferrari rear end not looking great in turn 20. And comes across the line and does go fastest, but only by 0.3 of a second. And I think there's 2 reasons for that. One, he's on the hardest tyre, but also the Ferrari in that final sector just doesn't look that great. But also, Leclerc made a mistake in the middle sector that we're just seeing. He locked up at the first chicane after the first of the DRS straights. And yeah, in the final sector, that Ferrari did not exactly look great in the final 2 corners. And now, after Leclerc, who will we see on track? As we get to see there a good little visor cam for Leclerc's face as he's driving the corners. Quite a lot of F1 personalities here this weekend. You've got Alonso, Alesi, now you've got Emerson Fittipaldi. As we've also got Perez and Stroll on track now on an outlap, as Kevin Magnussen goes P1 by half a second. As Gasly is on his first time during the session on the hard compound tyres as well. I don't know what tyres Magnussen was on, but good first run for K-Mag. As Gasly now comes up to the end of Sector 2. And Gasly, considering he's on the hard compound tyres, doing pretty well so far. Only a 1/10.5 down on Kevin Magnussen. As Gasly now comes into the final sector, into turn 15 and turn 16. And this Toro Rosso, you have to say, since I would say Mexico, it really has looked a lot better. Around Suzuka time, or Russia, it was not looking that great, this car, but these last 4 races, it's really been quite a big improvement for Toro Rosso as Pierre Gasly goes P3 and only a couple tenths slower than Charles Leclerc on the same tyre. So good first run for Pierre Gasly. And here's a replay of Gasly at turn 7, presumably locking up. No, just a replay of him going over the curbs at that chicane, the turn 5 and 6 chicane. As we now see Magnussen touring back. What tyres is he on? It's the medium compound tyres, and he's on the team radio, so there might be an issue here for Kevin Magnussen. Can't quite see what the issue would be as of yet, but he definitely does have an issue. I'm hoping we get a replay in a moment of what it could be. That car, I'm trying to think, has he had a rear suspension failure or something? Because his car looks a bit up in the air. Yeah, something looks a bit down on the rear end. Rear right, possibly, I'm not sure. We'll have to see a replay, but I thought I saw there his rear right looked a bit wonky. As Sergio Perez now goes P1 on a 138.8. As now we've got Lewis Hamilton, Alex Albon, Carlos Sainz, Valtteri Bottas, and Max Verstappen on track as well. As Stroll now goes P2 in a Racing Point 1-2. If you're a Racing Point fan, then take a photo of that order, because I don't think you'll ever see that again. As Magnussen now slowly comes back into the pits. So, we should be, honestly, looking at the track right now as Magnussen comes back in. because Lewis Hamilton is currently on his first timed run of the session. And I would honestly like to be seeing that. Charles Leclerc goes even faster. He does a 1:37.9. Very, very quick lap there by Charles Leclerc. That's a lot more like it from the Monegasque. And here is Lewis Hamilton, who is also on hard compound tyres. Let's see how quickly he can go. Again, as I said earlier, in the first two sectors, the Ferrari should be slightly faster than the Mercedes. But in the final sector, that's where the Ferrari really should be losing a lot of time. But he's currently 3/4 of a second down on Charles Leclerc after two sectors. So not a great lap so far. And he had horrific understeer into the first part of the triple chicane at the end of the second DRS straight. As he now comes into turn 17. Oh, rear end all over the place. And he's gone slightly off the track. This car does not look that great on this lap. And yet he's aborted that lap. But yeah, the rear end was dancing all over the place. And now he's backed out of that lap. As we have Albon, Sainz, Bottas and Verstappen currently on a lap. And now Norris and Kubica on outlaps as well. And the only drivers in the pits, Ricciardo, Vettel, Hülkenberg. Vettel, of course, had that crash in practice 1. And then Ricciardo had his engine failure as Albon goes P2. And here's a replay of Hamilton and yep, just losing the rear end. Rear end all over the place on that silver arrow. As Martin Brundle is currently overlooking the pit lane exit. Here's a replay of Gasly at the first chicane at the end of the first DRS straight. Locking the inside front and going straight over the chicane. And the absolute miles of runoff as Carlos Sainz goes up to 6th place. Kvyat goes up to 4th as here comes Max Verstappen on a set of medium compound tyres. And Max Verstappen should go P1. And he does by 0.8 of a second. So very good first run there for Max Verstappen. 0.8 quicker than anyone else straight away on the first run. Bottas goes second, about 0.4 down on Max Verstappen as Max now lets cars through. And now we're looking at Lando Norris on the track. And Lando is about to finish Sector 2. By the way, guys, I will, once Norris, Kubica and Hülkenberg finish their first flying lap, their first proper flying lap, I will update the order. Ricciardo and Vettel are still in the pits, but I don't think they'll be coming out for quite a few minutes. As here comes Lando Norris into the corner where Lewis Hamilton went off track. As Perez goes up to 5th. And this McLaren looking definitely good here. And this McLaren, I have to say, looking a lot better than it did in Brazil. In Brazil, it just didn't look that quick, even though they got the podium. Looking a lot better, this car, around the Yas Marina track. And, well, Norris only goes 13th. But the car does look a bit better than it did in Brazil. And now we wait for... And it's now Sebastian Vettel is on track as Fernando Alonso has now ventured into the McLaren pits. Of course, Fernando used to be an ex-McLaren refugee. As Magnussen is now getting strapped back into his Haas car. Don't know what the problem was, but obviously they have fixed it. But Sky F1 have now gone to an ad break. So because of that, I will do some of the order whilst we wait for them to come back. So, Max Verstappen is currently in P1 by just under half a second. Very good first run by Max. And then P2 is Valtteri Bottas, who, well, doesn't really matter where he finishes. He's starting from the back no matter what he does. Charles Leclerc, P3. By the way, commiserations to Valtteri Bottas because he announced on Twitter the ending of his marriage with his wife, or I guess ex-wife now, Amelia, I think it is. Sad news, but I'm hoping he is in the right, mental state of mind this weekend. Because he hasn't exactly had that great of a time, has he, in the last couple of weeks? Clearly, with that news and the news he's starting at the back and the engine failure, I guess, in Interlagos. So yeah, hopefully Valtteri is in a good state of mind, because I don't want to see him, struggling mentally. But yeah, Perez P5, Stroll P6, and then Leclerc P3, Albon P4. And then completing the top 10, Daniel Kvyat P7, Kevin Magnussen P8 in the Haas. And then completing the top 10 at the moment, Carlos Sainz and Kimi Raikkonen in the McLaren and Alfa Romeo respectively. And then in P11, it is the man who's already in P11 in my running order, Pierre Gasly, who of course is still, I'm sure, recovering after that immense podium in Brazil. And then it is his fellow French driver, Romain Grosjean, in P12. P13, Lando Norris. Lando should, and I forgot to talk about this, Lando, really get after Sainz this weekend, because he's raced here before, but also if you look at the last few races where he's, been up against Sainz and Sainz has beat him, at least he has had the excuse of, well, I've never raced here before. But this weekend, he doesn't have that. So I do want to see him really get after Sainz and prove a point, now that he doesn't have any excuses. Giovinazzi is 14th, and then 15th is Lewis Hamilton, but that's only because he set a very slow first lap because he made a mistake. I'm sure once we come back from the ad break, he will be in probably P1. Spelling there is correct. It is. And then you have Rosso and Kubica, 17th, or not 17th and 18th, 16th and 17th. And then it is Ricciardo, Vettel, Hülkenberg. But I'm sure those drivers, once they come back from the ad break, those drivers should have set their first proper time of the session. So there you go. That is the running order so far that I know of. Once we come back from the ad break, though, I will make sure to update it once I get the chance to. And there you go. So that's the running order for now, as far as I know. And we come back from the ad break, and it is, of course, different. Lewis Hamilton is now in P6, and Sebastian Vettel is now in P4. I'll give it a few minutes before I update it again, because Daniel Ricciardo is about to start his first run of practice too, and most of the cars are still on track. So, let's see what Ricciardo can do after the engine failure in practice 1. As he now comes through the first sector, a sector that doesn't really matter. And half a second down after one sector. I know it's his first run of practice too, but still. Just shows he's done it. How bad the Renault is. But let's see in this second sector, where it's all about power. Let's see what this Renault engine is doing. Because they didn't really do that well on the engine side. In Brazil, they were probably the worst power unit supplier in the last Grand Prix in terms of sheer power. And Ricciardo now coming up to, in a moment, the end of Sector 2. Let's see how he's done. And not that great. 1.3 down so far. Not looking too great of a first run here for Daniel Ricciardo, as he now comes into the final sector. And I guess this is just one of those, first flying laps of the session, just trying to get a feel for the car and make sure the car is operating the way it should be. As he now comes into the final couple corners in just a moment. Now he comes into the penultimate corner. Bit of understeer on entry, but rear end looking all right. And more understeer in the final corner, but the rear end also not looking great in that corner, but goes up to P11, which is an okay first lap. As Pierre Gasly now, on the hard compound tyres, comes through the final 2 corners. And Toro Rosso looking very, very squirmy on the rear end in the penultimate corner. But he now comes to the line and he stays in P14. But that Toro Rosso looks pretty good, considering they are on the hardest compound tyre. Compared to, say, Daniel Ricciardo, who's only gone 0.3 quicker on a tyre that's probably, half a second to 0.7 quicker? Yeah, pretty good for Toro Rosso so far. As now here is Lewis Hamilton on the warpath on the hard compound tyres. Now coming into the final sector. Let's see what Lewis Hamilton can do. Well, we're not going to be able to because of traffic. As well, a Williams there, I think, just went completely off track. He did. And now the Renault will get out of his way, but still, that will distract him. He won't be able to carry as much speed into the corners as he would want to. As he now comes up to the final corner, and this should be an improvement, but I don't think it'll be P1. No, it's P3. So, pretty good lap. Considering he had traffic, pretty good lap there for Lewis Hamilton. As there is on the TV Bono, who of course had his surgery, I think on his back a couple of races ago. Here's a replay of Antonio Giovinazzi going deep at the chicane at the end of the first DRS straight. And yep, just locked the inside front tyre. He unloaded inside front and went straight on. And now here is Valtteri Bottas, who I haven't noticed is only just under 1/10 off Max Verstappen's time. So he has improved his time quite a bit. But let's see what he can do on this lap. And then I think we'll update the order, because some people are now trying to come back into the pits. Valtteri Bottas is now on the DRS straight. And this sector is... if Mercedes are fighting Red Bull this weekend for the win, which I think they are, that's the sector where it's really going to be, I think, decided in Mercedes' favour, the second sector, because can Mercedes showcase the extra power I think they do have, then they should just about be able to hold off Red Bull. But if Red Bull with the Honda Power Unit are very competitive in that second sector, then it might swing in Red Bull's favour. But in the aerodynamic parts of the track, the Mercedes and Red Bull are very similar, as Valtteri Bottas rallying through turn 17 and 18 as a Red Bull has to get out of his way, and there's cars everywhere. As Valtteri, that's an absolute calamity. A Red Bull pulled to the inside of the penultimate corner, and Valtteri, there was no way he was going to turn into the corner how he normally would, and had to go off the track. So not great driving there by whoever that Red Bull was. And I think it was Alex Albon. Because he's just pitted. And he was right next to the pit entry. And here's a replay of Bottas rallying. And that's because he had a Red Bull basically parked on the exit of turn 16 or 17. And yeah, traffic really bad. Really bad. Valtteri Bottas. And no, it was actually Max Verstappen who blocked him, kind of, mostly. So, Bottas is still in P2. And now I'll update some of the order again, as Kevin Magnussen is about to complete another lap on the medium compound tyres. Where does he go? P9. Pretty good run there for K-Mag, but I have to say, the midfield is so far behind the top teams. They're about a second behind the slower cars of the top group, which is quite embarrassing. But normally in Abu Dhabi, you do tend, in qualifying trim especially, to get quite big gaps between people. Especially as well, because it's such a long lap as well. Just under 1 minute 40. But it's Hamilton in P3. Leclerc P4, Vettel P5. To be honest, I think that's what Ferrari are probably expecting at best this weekend, P4, P5. I just don't see how Ferrari can do better than that. They just don't have a car that in the final sector is anywhere near good enough to really compete. Then Albon is in 6th place. And then at the front of the midfield, surprise, surprise, it is Racing Point, P7 and P8. Where's this come from? This sudden turn of pace. And then it is Magnussen in 9th place, as Carlos Sainz is actually on a run here. But I don't think he is actually improving that much on this run, so we'll see how he does. But yeah, Magnussen is in 9th place. In 10th place is Carlos Sainz. And then you've got Ricciardo in P11. We'll see where Sainz goes with this lap. He will probably stay around P9, P10, I'd imagine, unless he has blitzed the final sector. And here he comes to the line. And no, he has not blitzed the final sector at all. But he was only about 1/10 of a second down on his fastest run so far. So, not too bad. And then, yeah, Ricciardo P11. And then it is Kvyat P12. P13, Kimi Räikkönen. By the way, no one so far has actually used a soft compound tyre. So don't worry. We haven't got into some proper serious qualifying trim running yet. We will, though, in a few moments' time, because everyone but Carlos Sainz is now in the pits. So we're about to get to that point where we get to see, in qualifying trim, in representative conditions and temperatures, who actually has a quick car around the Yas Marina Circuit. But yeah, Räikkönen 13th, Gasly 14th is a replay of Robert Kubica having to jockey the rear end through every corner because it's a Williams. And here is Sebastian Vettel at the end of the second DRS straight at the chicane, bumping over the orange sausage curbs. But Gasly 14th. And then you've got Lando Norris as Charles Leclerc comes on track. I'm assuming on soft compound tyres. Norris is 15th. And then you've got Romain Grosjean in 16th place, which is a bit surprising. And then Antonio Giovinazzi down in 17th. Also, even though Antonio's done well against Kimi Räikkönen to out-qualify Kimi at tracks where Antonio's not raced at before, he does need to really do it, especially this weekend, but in a more comfortable fashion, because again, he's raced here before. He doesn't have an excuse. So, yeah, Antonio needs to be on his game this weekend. But, and so does Nico Hülkenberg, if he wants to be remembered for a good final race, because currently he is in 18th place for some reason. Don't know what tyres he was on. Now I do. He was on hard compound tyres, but still 2.9 seconds down on Max Verstappen and about a second down on Ricciardo. Not that good. Not that good at all. And then Russell is, of course, 19th, and then it's Robert Kubica in 20th place as... Here we go, Charles Leclerc on a set of soft compound tyres. Let's see then, for the first time this weekend, what Ferrari have in qualifying trim, and let's see what the difference is between the tyres in terms of the amount of time you gain. Leclerc is currently 8/10 off on hard compound tyres compared to Max Verstappen's medium compound tyres. So Charles Leclerc should go comfortably quickest, but we've now gone to an ad break on Sky F1. Sky F1 really do make me very frustrated sometimes, but there you go. But I think now we will look at some comments, because clearly we can't do anything until they come back from an ad break. So Secchi hybrid in before penalty for Max Verstappen. If there was a penalty for Max Verstappen, then again, Ferrari are not competing for the win, so it'd be a clear Hamilton domination. Handsome, didn't Lewis get penalty for the same in Austria on Kimi, or was that in quali? That was in qualifying. The Hamilton block on Raikkonen, that was in Q1. In practice, it doesn't really matter. You do get brought to the stewards because I think they want to just, show you the incident and just make you aware of, be a bit more careful when it actually matters in qualifying, when people are throwing their car at the apex of the penultimate corner. But yeah, if it was in qualifying, he would have been given a penalty. No doubt about it. He would have been given a penalty. You don't get penalties for blocking really in practice unless you deliberately brake check people, which I've seen before. Fernando Alonso got a penalty for that in Hungary 2006, it was, because he was angry that a Red Bull of Robert Dornbos held him up. So Alonso passed him into turn 1 and then brake checked him about 3 times and then got a penalty for it. So unless you do something like that, then I don't really see how you can get a penalty for something you do in practice. Unless you miss the weighbridge. Right, let's find some other comments here. What the F was that advert from Sebastian? I know, that was the worst timed advert since Imola 2005. If you're British, you'll understand that reference. Right, let's find some other comments here. I don't expect much from Ferrari in 2020 now, says Secchi Hybrid. I haven't given my predictions yet, my early predictions, and of course I don't know what the Ferrari car is looking like in testing for 2020, because we're not there yet, but I'm just going to say it now. Ferrari are not winning next year. They're not winning the championship. No way in a million years are they going to go from being a joke to, being a dominant, quick, just well-run team. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen at all. Ferrari next season theoretically should be better, because as long as they start the season off with a car that's closer to Mercedes than they should be points-wise, in a better position by the end of the season, but they still won't be in a position to win anything. They'll win, 3 or 4 races maybe, but they ain't winning a championship, I can tell you that. They are not winning a world championship. Not in a million years are they winning it next year. Oh, and we come back from the replay, and Leclerc has hit the barriers on his run. So he's come into the corner where Sebastian Vettel crashed in practice 1. Oh, lost the rear end massively and hit the barriers. And that's that car parked now in the garage for quite a few minutes. And as I've said, the Ferrari in the final sector is diabolical. It doesn't have really any grip to speak of. And yeah, that is the result of that. Let's find some other comments here if I can. Because now that Leclerc's in the pits, there's no one on track. Plansome, this is Lewis's 7th race with this engine. Honda have still to get past 4 and 5. Will be interesting to see how Bottas's car performs as he started from the back. This is the thing with Valtteri, because it's so because getting held up in traffic is so bad, especially at this track, because it's so hard to overtake here. We're not really going to see on the race how quick he could have been with a completely fresh power unit. We're not going to see that, because by the time he gets through the pack, he'll have worn tyres, and then he'll probably go on to harder compound tyres and not really show that much pace compared to, say, the top 5. So it's a shame he has to start from the back. If he had a 5-place penalty or something, it would have been, good to see how his progress would be. But he'll get held up in traffic for so long that you won't really get to see how quick he can be. And yet further replay of Leclerc on turn 19. Applied the throttle on the exit curb, and the rear end said no, and went to the barriers. As now we have the two Mercedes cars on track, and Vettel and Perez, Stroll, Kvyat, Gasly, Grosjean, Rosso and Kubica, all on soft compound tyres. So, let's see what Valtteri and Lewis have. They should go very quick on this run. Clanson, will Matteo Binotto survive 2020 Ferrari tank yet again? He won't. He's lucky really to survive this season, because this season has been much worse than 2018 or 2017 was, I think, combined, to be honest. At least they contended for the World Championship in those seasons. But here comes Valtteri Bottas on his first proper quali soft tyre run. And he's a tenth and a half down on Max after the first sector. But as I've said before, the first sector is meaningless. Now comes into the second sector, where Valtteri's fresh engine really should come in handy. Not that it matters, because he won't be able to do really qualifying anyway, but should come in handy in this part of the track. As coming into now the first, or the end of the chicane, and at the end of the first DRS straight, now into the second DRS straight. And Bottas should be faster than Verstappen so far on this lap after this sector. He is, but only just by 12 thousandths of a second. As Russell goes 13th on soft tyres. Shows you the difference in the soft to the medium. As Bottas now comes to turn 16. No traffic this time. And now comes into the final few corners, where this car looks majestic, honestly. Oh, he loses the rear end as well, but he just about gets away with it. He was so close to the barriers. As Roman Grosjean goes third in the Haas. And now Valtteri comes to the line and goes P1 by 8 tenths of a second, but he could have gone a lot quicker if he didn't have that moment. He probably had another tenth and a half in the bag there. As Gasly goes P4. Going to all change around massively here, because the difference from hard to soft, medium to soft is massive around this track, as expected. As now Lewis Hamilton comes into the final few corners. Comes into turn 19. He doesn't lose the rear end. He keeps it nice and safe. And yeah, this car looking great into the final two corners. Lovely front end, lovely rear end, and he goes only P2. And about, 4 tenths off Valtteri Bottas. That's quite surprising, considering Valtteri was almost in the barriers at one point. As Perez goes up to 5th. Here's Sebastian Vettel. Let's see if he can make it through turn 19 without crashing. Oh, he was so close to the barriers, so close. Now throws it into the final two corners. And he will go, presumably, into P3. Yes, he does, but he's 8.5 tenths down on the two Mercedes cars. Or actually on Valtteri Bottas, but still, 8.5 tenths. And I guarantee you, that's mostly the final sector. And yeah, Valtteri got oversteered, but didn't have 2 bites of it like Leclerc did. Just a little wiggle for Valtteri Bottas. But yeah, very good first run then on that soft tyre, because he could have gone again probably another tenth and a half quicker than he did. And a Red Bull has just completely steamed in too quickly to the first corner and blown a load of time. And it is the Dutchman and Max Verstappen, who is going to continue on this lap anyway. Even though he has done a yellow first sector, which of course indicates he is not improved. Let's see what we can do for the rest of the lap. But yeah, for Ferrari, not looking good, is it? Sebastian Vettel improved to P3, but is only, 3/100ths of a second quicker than Max. And Max's lap was on medium compound tyres. So, yeah, they're not in for a good weekend, are they, Ferrari? As now Max gets a cheeky slipstream from Sebastian Vettel. And yeah, on this lap, he's not really improving. I think he's probably not pushing as hard as he could. Let's update this picture. There you go. Show the Alfa of Kimi Räikkönen. And here comes Max Verstappen into the final sector, where he should be very quick, but he won't really be improving that much on this lap, as he now comes into the final couple corners. And Lewis Hamilton moves out the way very nicely for him. And Verstappen comes to the line and goes P3, half a second down on Valtteri Bottas. And, well, it wasn't really that good a lap. It was quite poor, honestly. And here we go into turn 1. Turns in, and the rear end was not as compliant as Max would have wanted. So he blew at least, say, 3-4 tenths doing that. And then that obviously compromises your run a bit into the next corner. So yeah, Max can probably go right there with Bottas on lap time. But as Carlos Sainz there sparking away. But yeah, if Verstappen gets his lap together, he's looking very quick in the Red Bull, because he's only what, a tenth and a half down on Hamilton, and he made a massive mistake on his lap. So Max is looking pretty good. And that's a promising sign for Red Bull. As here is Lewis Hamilton on another flying lap, I believe. Yes, it is. And he's currently about quarter of a second down on Valtteri Bottas after the first 2 sectors. So better lap. Now he comes into the final sector. Car's ahead. Is that car going to move out the way for him? Yes, it does. It's a racing point. And now there's a Ferrari ahead of him, Sebastian. No, it's Charles Leclerc, I believe. And yeah, that Ferrari held him up yeah, it definitely held him up. He's now backed out. So Hamilton backs out again, as now he lets through that Ferrari, which I believe was Charles Leclerc. And yeah, I think it was. So let's now see what Charles Leclerc can do on his now first proper run. As Leclerc now comes up to the end of the first sector, sorry. And we're not seeing sector times. He's done a purple first sector, so good start to the lap for the Monegasque. And, well, once Leclerc sets this lap, I think I'll update the running order, because most people have done a soft tyre run now. As Charles Leclerc opens the DRS on the first DRS straight. He now heads down to that chicane. And he should be purple in the middle sector as well, because again, fresh power unit, and it's all about power, which of course Ferrari love. And in the middle sector, he is purple by quarter of a second. But let's now see how much time he's going to lose in the final sector. I reckon this is going to be about half a second to 3/4 of a second. Let's see how much time he loses in this final sector. As he now comes into turn 17. And, oh, bit of understeer there. Into turn 19. Rear end kind of dancing around on him. Into the penultimate corner. Carlo looking all right. And into the final corner. Bit of understeer, but now comes to the line. And he goes P3 by... And he is, what, 4 tenths off Bottas? So he lost about 6 to 7 tenths of a second in the final sector. 6 to 7 tenths of a second in the final sector. That is how bad that Ferrari chassis is. As now Daniel Ricciardo is on a soft tyre run. And now into the final sector of his lap. De Regara Ferrari have never won in Abu Dhabi. That is indeed the case. They've never even had pole position, which is quite embarrassing to a certain degree, because they have that whole theme park, do Ferrari. Ferrari World at this track, but they've never done well here. I mean, they've not that many times been on the podium here. As Ricciardo stays 18th. So not that good at all from Daniel Ricciardo, who is, what, half a second down on Hülkenberg. Yeah, not too great. For Renault, 15th and 18th. And Toro Rosso are currently P9 and P10. So yeah, Toro Rosso clearly looked the quicker team this weekend. And I think it's about time now that I do the running order. Because I think, now that we're halfway into practice 2, I think it's now time for us to do so. So Valtteri Bottas is in P1. It is a shame he does have his penalty as a Renault goes wide at turn 16. It's a shame he has a penalty, Bottas, because he's very quick. Very quick around this track. But there you go. Hamilton, P2. And then you've got Charles Leclerc, P3. And honestly, I think Leclerc did the best he could on that lap, but still, in that final sector, the Ferrari just has no grip compared to the Mercedes or Red Bull. So yeah, Leclerc in 3rd place. Sorry about my throat, guys, but it's a usual occurrence with me, isn't it? And then, yeah, Max Verstappen is in 4th place. But Max can go probably half a second quicker than he did on his lap. So, yeah, Max is still looking very good here for a good weekend, I think. And then, as we're now looking at Martin Brundle watching the cars through turn 17, 18, we're unable at the moment to look at what the running order is. So, once it comes back, then I'll redo the rest of it. Abu Dhabi Sector 3 equals Barcelona Sector 3 for Ferrari. Absolutely. It is the same. In Sector 3, I think in Barcelona, in quali, Ferrari lost 0.8 of a second. Which is, I think it's more embarrassing in Barcelona because the final sector in Barcelona is what? 15, 16 seconds? So I think it's a bit more embarrassing that, considering the small amount of time it takes to get through that final sector. At least at this track, I mean, the final sector is what, 37 seconds long? So it's a bit more understandable, but still, it's not good enough, is it? For a team like Ferrari to be losing, you know, about 0.6 of a second in one sector, which we know doesn't suit their car, but still is quite poor. And I think it also has become pretty clear, as I know I'll do the rest of the order now. I think it's become pretty clear that after Ferrari's upgrade at Singapore, it's now been negated by the fact that Mercedes improved their car at Suzuka with a new side deflector on their side pod, and Red Bull have also, with Honda, brought new parts as well. So that upgrade Ferrari brought to the Singapore Grand Prix is now, again, as I said, negated, and they've gone back to basically how they were in Spain or Hungary because Mercedes and Red Bull have re-established their advantage in the corners. So, yeah, I mean, that upgrade for Ferrari was great, but it came way too late in the season, and, well, I think understandably they haven't upgraded the car since because they should be concentrating on making a much better racing car for 2020 as Antonio Giovinazzi bins it at turn 19. He hasn't actually crashed into the barrier as he's spun at turn 19, but his tyres are now completely gone, flat spotted, and now has to do a 3-point turn to get out of that situation. And I think what has happened there is he's probably turned in on the curb of the previous corner, and the rear end has just completely gone around on him. But Albon is in P6, and then it is Romain Grosjean in 7th place. And here we go. So into these corners. Looking fine up until turn 19. And no, that's very weird. He turned into the corner, put the throttle down, the car just completely spun around. He didn't, turn in too early, get on the curb a bit too much. He just turned in, put the throttle down, and the car spun. Very, very weird spin. I wouldn't put that down to Antonio. I think that's more the car. That's a very weird spin. Yeah, that car... Yeah, that didn't look good from a car perspective. Anyway, completing the top 10, Romain Grosjean is now in P7. As Antonio... Oh no, Kimi Raikkonen is now on a soft tyre run, I think. But Perez is in P8, and then it is Kvyat and Gasly, 9th and 10th. In the Toro Rossos. As now Kimi Raikkonen is now into the final sector of the track. And let's see what the Iceman can do. Well, on this run so far, he hasn't improved his first two sectors. So I don't know if this is a race simulation run. But actually, I think it is. Yeah, I think it's a race simulation run because he's very slow on this lap. Well, let's see, actually, when he comes up to the final two corners. And, yeah, surely this is a race sim. But he's not quick at all. As Raikkonen comes to the line. And, yeah, very slow. It wasn't a race sim, but it was a very slow lap. He was not 8 tenths, about 7 tenths down on his personal best. Yeah, not that good for Kimi and Alfa, 17th and 18th. Can't exactly say it's a surprise, though, can we? Alfa were not expected to do well here, and they're not doing well. But yeah, the two Toro Rossos so far are completing the top 10. And then it is Sainz and Norris in P11, P12 for the Woking McLaren team. And then you've got Lance Stroll in 13th as Pierre Gasly, I think, is now on a run. Don't know if it's a race or qualifying sim. Yeah, Stroll 13th. And then Kevin Magnussen is in 14th place as one of the Toro Rossos moves out the way of Gasly. It's Kvyat, obviously. And then 15th is Nico Hülkenberg. And Renault are about, 3 or 4 tenths away from the top 10, which again is not good. That's not good. If you're going to be outside the top 10 in the midfield, you've got to be, close on time, not 3 or 4 tenths away. Especially if you're Renault, that's not cutting it. Not cutting it at all. And then, yeah, Ricciardo 16th. Ricciardo is about 6 tenths down on Toro Rossos. And yet, this is definitely a race run for Pierre Gasly because he's not really going that quick at all. And then Kimi Raikkonen is 17th. 18th is then Antonio Giovinazzi. And then it is Russell and Kubica at the back of the grid. And that is really the qualifying simulations over and done with. Because, of course, the race simulations are very important here. Tyre wear is a critical thing at this track. If you're wearing your tyres out a lot here, then you can qualify as well as you want. You're not going to be in for a good race. So they've got to find out how long the tyres are lasting and how the car feels as well on heavy fuel and worn tyres. But with 36 minutes to go, just under 37 minutes to go in the practice session, just want to say, guys, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, as we'll be doing a watch-along tomorrow for qualifying and a watch-along, of course, for the race on Sunday as well. And we'll be doing watch-alongs for practice 2, qualifying and the race in 2020 as well for all 21 or 22 races. Can't remember exactly how many races there are, but there are a lot. I know that. But we'll be doing watch-alongs for 2020 and the rest of the weekend as well. So don't forget to subscribe for that. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Or go to my homepage and do it there and hit the notifications bell so you're notified as to when I go live and upload. And as well, hit the like button for more content like this because it does really help out the channel getting noticed and it shows me that you guys do enjoy the content on the channel. But considering that we're now into the race simulation part of the session, I think it's about time, guys, that you guys start asking me some questions and bringing up some topics. So yeah, for the next 35 minutes, if you want me to talk about a certain topic currently in Formula One or general any time in Formula One, then put it right now in the live chat, and for the next 35 minutes, I'll just answer your questions and discuss whatever topics you want me to discuss. So yeah, make sure to put that in the chat, and I'll go off basically for 35 minutes straight. But again, I do need a quick sip of my drink, so I'll be back in just a moment. Right, so we are currently on an ad break on Sky F1. So let's see what you guys have to say in the chat and what topics you want me to talk about. Nib, great to see you, mate. It says thoughts on the Banter Club. Oh my. Yep, Ferrari like 6 or 7 tenths off in final sector. It's horrible, absolutely horrible. How can you be? You know, the amount of money that and R&D that goes in at that team. How can you be that bad? I don't get it. I really don't get it. Mango Gamer asks or suggests, I guess, topics for 2020: Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, Zandvoort, and Vietnam. Good racing. So I'm guessing you want me to talk about for the teams. You want me to talk about how good I think they'll be, and then the tracks and whether I think they'll be good racing. Right. Mercedes, well, they're the favourites for next season. There's no doubt about it. Red Bull are really, with Max Verstappen creeping up on their shoulder, but you've got to back Mercedes. They're the best team in Formula One. They've got the best driver in Formula One. And the amount of money that they're putting into Formula One. Sebastian Vettel actually goes up to P4 just now. But the amount of money that they're putting in, and the amount of hard work and the great work that they're putting in, it's very hard to see them, you know, being off the boil next season. And I think next season, even if they don't win, say, the driver's title or the constructors, they're going to be very close, very, very close to winning it. That's how hard they will be to beat. You're not going to thrash them next season. So I'd say Mercedes are the favourites. And then, who else? Ferrari will basically have a better start next season to what they had this season, but it will just be calamity over and over again. Constant mistakes, bottle jobs, driver errors, engine failures, 5-second penalties, you name it. Ferrari are not winning the championship next year. Absolutely no chance in hell. Red Bull, though, with Honda, are the dark horse for the World Championship next season with Max Verstappen. And I actually made a video about this, I think about a month ago. So if you want to go check that out, make sure to do so. It's called Can Red Bull with Honda Win the World Championship in the future? But for 2020, if Red Bull can maintain this pace that they have at the moment at the start of next season and continue that through the rest of the season and keep improving, because you cannot doubt Red Bull are the best team in Formula One when it comes to development through a season. They really are. So if they can start off the season how they're ending it, with Max Verstappen driving as well as he is, with Honda continuously making gains on the power unit, I don't see why Max Verstappen can't at least contend for the championship. I'm not saying he'll win it, and at the moment, I don't think Max Verstappen... If I was to bet my money, I wouldn't bet it on Verstappen winning in 2020. I would still probably go Lewis Hamilton, because I just think they'll be too consistently strong. The Hamilton-Mercedes package over the course of 2020. But if the Red Bull car starts next season how it's ended this season, Max will contend for the World Championship. No doubt about it. Will he win it? Who knows? That's a completely different, story. But he will be contending for sure. As Gunter Steiner looks like he's shouting at someone in the Haas pits. And then who else? McLaren. McLaren should really just maintain what they've done this season, but be a bit more consistent at the front of the midfield. And I think if McLaren can be, say, I don't know, a second off the front-running pace next season on a consistent basis, be about a second off the pace. I think that'll be a good 2020 McLaren car. I mean, of course, they want to be closer than a second. They want to be the fastest in Formula 1 eventually, but considering that they're still midfield material, I think if they were about, again, a second off the front-running pace, that would allow them at certain races when chaos is going off for them to maybe get a podium. So, you see what I mean? If they can be within that second or be about a second off, then when there is chaos, they can then capitalize and really get a great result. But I think, have I updated Vettel ahead of Verstappen? No, I have not. Let me do that right now. By the way, I've just noticed Albon is half a second off Max Verstappen. I'm sorry, that's not good enough. Albon's raced here before. He doesn't have an excuse. And he's had plenty of races now in the Red Bull. I know the car is built for Max, but half a second off, that's just not good enough, in my opinion. Hulkenberg currently on a race sim. And the two Renaults, again, 15th and 16th. Not a great end to the season so far. And then what? Zandvoort and Vietnam, will there be good racing at those tracks? Zandvoort, no, because it's too narrow. Vietnam, though, I think could be a bit of a Baku. Be a bit of a Baku-type race. I think if we get some chaos, I think we'll have a mental race next year. But if it's a race where people are not going off that much and there's not that much chaos, I think we'll get kind of a meh kind of race. But I think the race in Vietnam will be better than Zandvoort for sure, because Zandvoort's just too narrow. And the only reason we're going to Zandvoort is because of money, not because of the racing. If we're going to go for the racing, we wouldn't be going to Zandvoort, I can guarantee you that. As Martin Brundle now stood watching the cars at the final two corners. Let's find some other comments here or topics you guys want me to talk about. Seki hybrid Mercedes would be scary next year with that car, which they started building so early. Well, that's the thing with Mercedes, is they really gave up on 2019 development after Hockenheim. They did bring an upgrade to the Suzuka, but it wasn't that big. It was a small adjustment, if you like. But yes, since really the summer break, Mercedes, I think, have been full steam ahead on 2020. So that's why that's another reason why, again, still you'd have to make them the favourite for 2020. But then again, Red Bull also have not brought that many updates in the final few races of the season. So I think also they're concentrating a bit on 2020 as well. But let me just adjust this picture quickly of Seb Vettel. See what you guys have to say. Will 2020 be Williams' last year in F1? From Robert Stainer. No. I think 2021 kind of saves them for a few years, but if they continue being this bad into like 2021, 2022, and still financially they're not in a good position, then I think they will be pulling out of Formula 1. And I mean, it'll be sad to lose them. And they are, let's be honest, guys, Williams are going to be out of Formula 1 before 2030. They're going to be out of Formula 1 before then. It will be sad to lose the name, but they deserve it. They put themselves in this position through their own stubbornness and poor decision making over the last 22 years. Crystal Racing, my ego will hit overdrive if Alfa start 2020 better than Ferrari. I think Alfa, I was thinking about this the other day with Alfa. If they can start the season off how they did last year in terms of the pace of the car and just be a bit more consistent, I reckon Alfa could probably end up, say, by race 7 or 8, top 5 in the Constructors. I think people forget Alfa have actually had a really quick car this year at certain times of the season, but just because of their lack of consistency, you forgot about that. Well, not necessarily you, but, you know, most people out there have forgot about how quick that car's been. In the first 4 races, it was one of the quickest in the midfield. At certain races, you could argue it was the best. Then they had a bit of a slump for a couple of races. Then from about France to the Italian Grand Prix, they had a car that was consistently top 10. And then really where their season fell off was after Singapore. But as long as they were, or as long as they can be rather, more consistent next year and maintain the speed of their car from the best parts of this season, I don't see why Alfa can't have a good 2020. I mean, you know, Kimi, if you give him a car that's good enough, he'll do the best he can. And Antonio has improved a lot during this season. And I think with a proper year now under his belt, he'll be very good next season, as long as he continues to improve, which he should. Right, let's find some other topics. Jedi Master, the Red Bull Honda was built around Max. It doesn't suit Albon. True, but still, half a second off at a track which he does know well is still not good enough. I mean, if I'm going to criticise Gasly like I did earlier in the season for it, I've got to do the same for Albon. So, yeah. Harith Zach, I know this might not happen, but if you were to replace Hamilton from Mercedes, who would you put in his seat? I'd probably put Max Verstappen in his seat because he is the best driver after Lewis Hamilton. But if you're not going to go for Max Verstappen, one, if you don't want him, or 2, if you can't get him, then honestly, I'd go for George Russell. Because I think that guy, honestly, right car, right time, I think that guy's a race winner. And I think he's a very, very good driver. Very good driver. But just hasn't, so far in his career, of course, at Williams, he hasn't been given a good enough car. I mean, this season, if he was in a racing point, it would have been so great to see how well he would have done. I mean, he could have ended up with a surprise podium. Because I think, honestly, he has been that quick this season. So it is a shame that Russell is stuck in that Williams. But as long as he continues to show that he is very good and he is, you know, pulling out immense amounts of lap time out of that car, then I think that's good enough for him to showcase, you know, his proper talent. And I think we have to also remember, Russell, that he had, for me, one of the best performances of any driver this season in Hungary, where he outqualified, Ricciardo and Perez. I know they had their little get-together in qualifying, but still, to outqualify them in that car is unbelievable. And then in the race, he was pretty good as well. So, yeah, if you're not going to go for Max Verstappen, I'd probably go for Russell. But other than that, yeah, I can't really think of anyone who absolutely, you know, stands out. Crystal Racing says, such a shame we're not going to the Kimi Ring in Finland next year. They're holding a MotoGP race instead. Yeah, we need a race in Finland, but we're never going to get it, are we? It's one of those races like Kyalami in South Africa. Even though we've raced there before, it's just one of those races where we're just never going to see cars there again. As much as it gets talked about every year, you'll get a story of, you know, Formula One considering. It's never going to happen. It is never going to happen, unfortunately. Right, let's find some other topics here. And Crystal Racing says Alpha's strategy and pit stop crews are a bit questionable. Strategically, it's kind of up and down. I wouldn't say they're absolutely nailed down as being bad on that side. They're definitely not Ferrari, but then again, it takes effort to be that bad. Pit crew wise, yeah, I agree. They're not exactly the finest pit crew, but you know, most of the time, I guess they get the job done. But that whole thing in Mexico with I think was it Antonio Giovinazzi was quite embarrassing. Let's be honest. As what's happened here then? So Valtteri Bottas and a Haas have, I think, have had a collision at the triple chicane at the end of the second DRS straight. Oh no, it's it's Romain Grosjean. They must have had a collision because they were both spun round. Let's see. Yeah, they've had a collision. So here we go. End of the second DRS straight. Valtteri dives down the inside. Roman, what are you doing, you absolute idiot? Valtteri literally had all of his car alongside. Roman just turns in like, oh, there's no one there. You absolute clown. Why is Roman on the grid still? I actually used to be quite a fan of him, but how can you be after that? Is he not looking in his mirrors? I mean, surely he's been told that he's got Valtteri there. Oh, that's not Valtteri. Is that Valtteri or Hamilton? No, that is Valtteri. Surely he knows he was behind him. Come on. That's such a dumb mistake. That's such a dumb mistake. And now Valtteri's not going to go out again because his car will be too badly damaged, I think. But that is so stupid. Valtteri had basically all of his car alongside and Roman just turns in like no one's there. I know it's not the race, but come on. It's kind of similar to a situation where one car's lapping another. You've got to know he's there, and now we've got a red flag for debris. But you've got to know he's there and also be willing to give up the corner, to give way to the clear, faster car. But no, he just turns in like there's no one there. If that happened in the race, Roman would be banned for a race. That's how bad that was. F1 reviews triggered. Bottas got Grosjean. Absolutely. But so here we go. So Roman. Again, though, you can't give me the excuse of, oh, well, Valtteri came up very quickly behind him. He would have either been told or he would have seen in his mirrors that Valtteri was behind him. But it's Romain Grosjean. Who am I kidding? Dan admitted he shocked Grosjean got another year. I would have expected him to be absolutely, pumping up his case. But this is the thing. I used to be, I wouldn't say a fan, but I really wanted to see him do well because I kind of felt sorry for him after 2012. Roman, I kind of felt sorry for him because I could see that the talent was there, the speed was there. He just needed to mentally, get it right, and he would get it right. And he did at the end of 2013 and in 2015, 2016. He was really doing well. But in the last couple years, he's gone back to the Roman of 2012, where the speed is promising, but he rarely delivers, if at all. And yeah, it is a shame. But in that instance, that is clearly Romain Grosjean's fault. Right, let's find some other comments and topics. Crystal Racing, I don't get it. We've not had a race in the Nordic region since 1978 when Sweden held a race back then with Ronnie Peterson was racing before he was killed at Italy. Yeah, we used to have a Swedish Grand Prix. I think it was Anderstorp, I think it was called. Yeah, I don't get why we haven't been back since, because we've had, talk of a race in Copenhagen. which thankfully is not going to be on the calendar because the track looks terrible for that race. Finland should have a race. Sweden, but then again, what has Sweden had for Formula One since Ronnie Peterson and Stefan Johansson? You know what I mean? Not really that much. But yeah, it is a surprise that we haven't had a race in that long. You would have thought there would have been a few years where we had races there. But let's find other comments. Crystal Racing saying, Grosjean outpaced Kimi in qualifying when both were at Lotus, but Kimi put him on his backside in the races. That's the thing. If Roman was, clean and mentally there in the races to be able to look after the car and consistently drive well in the races, I think Roman would have been at a top team eventually in his career. Because as you said, he would outqualify Kimi a lot. And he was definitely faster over a single lap than Kimi Räikkönen. There is no doubt about that whatsoever. But Kimi was so consistent and is so consistent that Roman just couldn't, match him in that area. And, quite a lot of debris on track. But I think it is now green flag racing on track. Crystal Racing saying, have a feeling if Kubica gets a reserve driver at Haas, he has a 50% chance of replacing Grosjean mid-season. Possibly. That is a possibility. Because I wouldn't be surprised if Gunther Steiner just got fed up and said, you know what, Roman, you're done. Just go away. Gunther is that type of guy where he would get fed up mid-season and tell the driver to F off. As the session will restart in 2 minutes. The timer, of course, is still running because that's what happens in practice. They don't stop the timer in practice, but they do in qualifying. And, of course, the laps do stop if there is a red flag. Yep, session will be back underway in a couple minutes' time. Let's find some other comments here if I can. In case I missed any. Harith Zach, Grosjean needs to be dropped, replace Hulkenberg in his seat. Yeah, Hulkenberg should be in the car. There is no doubt about that whatsoever. How Grosjean was kept at Haas, I mostly don't understand. The reason I say mostly is because there is a small reason as to why I think he has, is because the car this season has been very poor. I think why they've kept the same lineup is because they want continuity from one year to the other, so those same drivers can give the key feedback as to whether the car is actually better. So that's the only reason I can see Roman still being in the car. So he can provide that continuity into 2020, so can give further feedback as to how they've improved and how it's different and stuff like that. Because Haas have had to do that this season and for next season as well. But other than that, there's no reason. There is really no reason for Romain Grosjean being in Formula One. So, yep, it's a mystery of life, isn't it? Romain Grosjean in a Formula One seat at this point of his career. Crystal Racing, I think Hulkenberg turned down a contract offer because the salary offered was too low for his demands. I think Hulk's had enough of F1. Well, if that is the case, and of course we don't know that to be true, then you can't really say that he's been unlucky and not getting a seat, if that is the case. Because, there was a seat there. Again, if that was the case, that he was offered a seat, but he turned it down. I think Hulkenberg I think it's best, honestly, that he leaves Formula One because he's had his day. He hasn't proved what he should have done, considering the hype And that's why I still think he is one of the most overrated drivers in the history of the sport, because for a guy that was talked about being in a McLaren when they were good, or a Ferrari, or a Red Bull, he's not at a podium in a decade. So I don't get the hype. I really don't get the hype. And I think considering how long it's been in his career that he's just not shown what people, believe he should be, or believe that he, or, show the talent that people believe he has, it's just time for him to go. It's time for him to go. He's, I wouldn't say washed up, but he's yesterday's news, I think, Nico Hülkenberg. Right, let's find a few more before the end of the session, as we now have, 10 minutes to go in the session. That has to be the worst decision ever to keep Grosjean. Indeed it is, Zach. Crystal Racing, he was close to getting a podium at 2017 Singapore when Bottas was struggling. He was, and then he had was it a pneumatic valve problem? Something like that. His pneumatics failed, I think, on his car. I think that's what happened, but I know he retired with a reliability issue. But yeah, that sucks, but I don't think he would have got a podium that day. I still think it would have been Hamilton, Ricciardo, Bottas on the podium. And Martin Brundle actually picked up or made a great point in Brazil during qualifying that race in 2012 at the Interlagos track, that race basically made or break his career. Because if he won that race, Nico would have been in a Ferrari, no doubt about it. Because, well, if you look at the other seats, I don't think he would have gone to McLaren because Sergio Perez was already confirmed there, and I don't really think he would have been a good fit. But I think Ferrari, considering the time period, I think they probably would have gone for Hülkenberg. Because if a driver in a midfield car wins a race, you've got to put him in your car. If you obviously have a driver that is not good enough anymore, like they had Ferrari and Felipe Massa, you've got to do so. But because he cocked it up and made a massive mistake, crashing into Lewis Hamilton, he's paid the price for that. And you may say, oh, well, that's just one mistake. But in Formula One, and not even in sport, but in life, when you get not a mistake, when you get an opportunity, a big opportunity to make a massive gain in your life, you've got to take it. You've got to take the opportunity. And that's what the best drivers in Formula One history have done. When they've got an opportunity to get a great result, they've got it because they make it happen for them. The drivers who are not as good don't make it happen for them. That's just the way it is. And if Hülkenberg was ever going to be a very good or great driver, then he would have made that happen for him in Brazil in 2012. But he didn't, because he simply got too aggressive in that move and made a mistake. Right. Let's find some others here if I can. Other comments. Remember Esteban Gutierrez? I do. I will say Esteban Gutierrez, I don't think I've mentioned this before. He does look a lot like a young Ayrton Senna when he was at Lotus. Ayrton looks very similar to Ayrton Senna when he was at Lotus. As just looking at the TV, you've got Max Verstappen following a Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel in the final sector with just under 7 minutes to go in practice 2. The racing, I agree, Hulk's overrated, but I feel quite sad to see someone like him never get a top seat for at least 1 year. Did he deserve it, though? That's the thing. Did he deserve it? I don't think he did. I think if you look at all the seasons where we had the top 3 teams looking for drivers, I don't think I can absolutely say he deserved one of those seats at any time in his career. I mean, around 2013, 2014, he was being talked about as being at Ferrari. And of course, Ferrari went for Kimi Räikkönen. Now, at the time, that wasn't well received because even though Raikkonen was good, he was old and Hülkenberg was perceived as the new up-and-coming youngster. But on reflection, Ferrari made the right decision, didn't they? Because Kimi Raikkonen I think, had a good stint 2014 to 2018. Could have been a lot better, but let's be honest, Kimi Raikkonen, in his second stint of his F1 career, has not been as good as his first stint, and he is, at best, Kimi, a number 2 in a top team, but still a very, 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 very good number 2 driver. But in that instance, the right decision was made. Kimi Raikkonen had a good second stint at Ferrari, and I don't really see that as a bad decision. And then after that, you have Mercedes in 2017 when Rosberg retired, but then again, in 2016, did Hülkenberg really have a good enough season to earn a call-up? And I know he'd already signed for Renault, but if he hadn't signed for Renault when Mercedes were looking, I don't think he would have got it anyway, because I don't think he performed well enough that season to get that seat. So, yeah, I just don't think Hülkenberg, if you look at his career and how he's performed, I just don't think he's ever really deserved that top seat. I just don't see it. I just don't see that speed and that talent that people rave about. I just don't see it. Right. Let's find a few more here. Seki Hybrid saying Ferrari being a mobile chicane in the third sector. Indeed. Crystal Racing, Perez proved he was a bit meh at McLaren by getting outpaced often by Button. But then again, it is Jenson Button. I mean, Button outpaced a few teammates in his time. You know, Jacques Villeneuve, who wasn't great in 2003, but was still, you know, doing all right. Barrichello, obviously. Button obviously outpaced him. So that was good competition. Button obviously beat Hamilton in 2011. So there's no shame really in losing to Jenson Button. And I think the pressure put on Perez in that season at McLaren was too much. Because, again, as you said, McLaren car that season was poor. But also, he went from, you know, he was a young driver, never been at a top team before. And he was expected, to just go into the McLaren and annihilate Jenson Button. I mean, I know they wanted someone to be right there with Button, if not beating him, to try and, I guess, replace Lewis Hamilton. But they were never going to replace Lewis Hamilton. They still haven't. So, I think Perez, honestly, was very unfairly treated by McLaren and very unfairly perceived by the fans and the media, because I don't actually think he did that bad in 2013. I think if he was given a car that season that was as good as the 2012 car, I reckon Perez probably could have won a race that season. He did have a couple races in 2013 where he was very good. Remember India, where he finished in P5? Remember one race, I think Brazil, he started at the back and came up to 6th. So, I mean, people really need to look at what actually happened at McLaren. Perez didn't really, or wasn't really given a chance, I think, at McLaren. I don't think he really was. I think if Perez went to Ferrari, then I think Perez's career would have been fine, because he would have been basically a number 2 driver at Ferrari, and a very good one, and he probably would have had a few podiums, maybe a race win. But yeah, his time at McLaren, I won't say I'm bitter over it, because I know you guys know that I do like Sergio Perez, but I don't like the perception that he gets, Perez, for his time at McLaren, because what could he really do in that car? The car was poor, and he had way too much pressure put on him. Way too much pressure. And I think the same goes also for Kevin Magnussen as well. In 2014, Magnussen, I thought, did really well in 2014, considering it was his first year in Formula 1. He was over a single lap faster than Jenson Button, even though Button in the races annihilated him most of the time. But Magnussen was in his first season, and the car was poor, but then gets dropped. Well, for Button, basically, because they had Alonso signed already. So I just think Perez and Magnussen, I think, very unfairly treated, honestly, at their time at McLaren. But anyway. Let's find 2 more comments as we're now into the final 30 seconds of practice 2. 2 more comments and then we'll come to the end of the stream. Seki Hybrid, Perez is an odd one since after his year at McLaren he found his pace again. I think, again though, at McLaren, too much pressure put on him and he was expected to do things that he shouldn't be expected to do. He really shouldn't have been expected to do, but there you go. That's the mistakes McLaren made in the last 3 or 4 years, or maybe longer than that, 5, 6 years. But honestly, if we're talking about midfield drivers who deserve top seats, Sergio Perez. That guy deserved, and still I think deserves, to be driving a car that can fight for podiums, honestly. But anyway, that is, guys, the session over. Practice 2 has finished. See the text here. Practice 2 is over. And there you go. And I will read out the order in just a moment. I'll just read out one final comment and then we will get to the end of the stream. Good morning to Mr. Young Gun, who is on the east coast of the US. Let me find one final comment. I can. Then we will get to the end of the stream. Just trying to find one final one. Crystal Racing, I think Perez's collisions of Ocon has put off top team bosses from wanting to sign him. I think they were put off way before that, to be honest. I think that year in 2013 was what did it. Even though, again, unfairly perceived Perez for that season. Very unfairly perceived. Because when you're given that car and when given that team that was really flagging at the time, what are you expected to do, really? I mean, Jenson Button, it's not exactly like Jenson Button had an amazing season in 2013. He was better than Perez, but, you know, he should have been given more time, Perez, in an actual good car. But anyway, that is the end of practice 2. Let's quickly sum up the session. So, for me, the favourite going into tomorrow is probably Lewis Hamilton for pole position, but Max Verstappen is looking close. Max Verstappen, to me, looks very close in the fight for pole position. I know he's 5th, but he didn't really improve on his timed run. And the 2 Ferraris are only slightly quicker. So Max Verstappen tomorrow will definitely be in the fight for pole position. Valtteri Bottas looks very quick, but starts from the back. So unless there's a safety car on Sunday, I don't really see how Valtteri can fight for anything meaningful. Ferrari, dead slow. Final sector, they're losing way too much time. Alba needs to improve his speed by about 1/4 of a second. And then in the midfield, it's all over the place. You got Haas up there, Racing Point, Toro Rosso. At the moment, as they're now doing practice starts on the grid, in terms of the pecking order of the midfield, I'd have to say it's probably McLaren and Toro Rosso at the top of the midfield. And then after that, I would say Racing Point. And then probably Haas, Renault, and then Alfa at the moment. That's what it looks like to me. But, of course, that will be completely different tomorrow because some teams, as we know, are not pushing as hard as possible. And we can expect, definitely, I think, tomorrow, quite a different order in qualifying. But, guys, that is it for this Practice 2 stream. Thank you, guys, for coming along for this stream. The first watch-along I've had since the race in Kota. So thank you, guys, for coming along. And I will see you guys tomorrow at 12 p.m. UK time. That's when I'm going to be going live for qualifying. I'll be live from 12 p.m. through until 2:30 p.m. UK time. And then shortly after that, I will upload my review of qualifying for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. So don't forget to subscribe for that. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Or go to my homepage and do it there and hit the notifications bell. Don't forget to hit the like button as well for more content like this. And also, again, does help out the channel and does show me that you guys do enjoy the content. And as well, comment down below what you thought of this video. And comment down below, going into tomorrow, who is looking good, in your opinion, and not so good for qualifying. And if you want to comment further on the topics I've been talking about, then make sure to do so. Don't forget to join our Discord server, link below in the description. That's the best place, that server, for notifications for my videos and streams. And we have over 400 people in that server now. So if you want to join that wonderful community over there, you can do so. Link below again. Follow me on Twitter at Chaz6110. Check out my website, chazrhd.com, for more content like this. And also make sure to hit my Facebook page with a like. That's ChazRHDF1 on Facebook. Make sure to hit that with a like. But guys, until 12 p.m. UK time live for qualifying for the final race of 2019, the 2019 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, it has been me, ChazRHD. Goodbye.